Alright, so first of all, you may be noticing the air conditioner noise. I'm sorry about that. There's not much I can do because I am unwilling to turn that thing off, given the recent heat wave. But yeah, this video is going to be a little bit of an aimless rant, um, if rant is the word for it, but just some thoughts about a topic that I've been thinking about tonight. Um, as maybe some of you know, if you've been following my weight loss vlog series, that uh, from about April of last year until April of this year, I was training in both Muay Thai and Brazilian Jiu Jitsu, at least a class a week. Most weeks I go to two or three, some weeks even more. Um, so I'm not like I'm not an expert. In fact, in my uneducated opinion, I still suck at both, but especially BJJ because I was never actually as passionate about it as I was Muay Thai, but I still went because I knew that I needed that skill set. Frankly, I would say it's even more important than Muay Thai. As much as I enjoy it less, um, there's just a lot more application for it, I think. Um, so to really get into the meat of what I wanted to say, I guess I'll start by saying that I'm thinking about this because I had seen this sentiment that, like, it takes what, like 2 3 maybe 4 years of training to be like decently good, and it's like you're investing all of that time into this thing before you really get anywhere with it. And so, like, why bother? um, which is just asinine to me because your options are, um, do that training, go through that period, and in 2 3 maybe 4 years you'll be decently good at your martial art of choice. Or you can train in those 2 to 4 years of training for a lifetime of not knowing how to grapple or box and being kind of helpless if you were ever to need those skills. So I think the choice there is pretty obvious. Um, if it's going to take you 2 or 3 years before you get to a point where you feel like your time is justified or whatever, then I'd say that means start now, um, so that you'll be there in 2 or 3 years instead of waiting another year or two, in which case you'll be there in 3 to 4 years, or longer, depending on how long you keep holding yourself back. So yeah, it does take 2 3 maybe 4 years to get decently good at it, and that's why you should get started right now if you haven't already. Um, I quit training just because I couldn't afford it anymore. Um, you have to realize, like I said, I started April of last year. Gas at that time was a fair bit cheaper than it is now. um, and not only that, but I was making pretty crap money at the time, and there were other things in my personal life as well that it was just like, okay, well, this job is just not enough. My life is just not sustainable this way. So I begrudgingly had to quit training, and I haven't been back yet because I did find another job that was paying more, so I could have afforded to go back, but the scheduling thing was an issue. And then my contract for that ended, so I'm back on the job market now, as of last week. But I think it's looking like I'm about to get started on something else soon here, and I'm also going to have days off during the week, during which I could go to classes. So I think I'm about to start my training again. I'm really excited about that. Um, it is hard. It's time consuming. It hurts. It hurts like a motherfucker sometimes. Um, but those skills are so important, especially, a lot of you know that, like, I'm a gun guy. As much as that may be surprising, but yeah, especially from that circumstance, I feel like a lot of people get into the mindset of like, oh well, I have a gun, so I don't really need to know how to fight. I can just shoot them, and it's just like most of the time you can't, not unless you want to go to prison for murder, and live with that on your conscience. So if you have one, I hope you do. If you don't, then I would prefer that you didn't carry. But so really, if you're gonna do either, learn to fight first, and then worry about a gun, because that's gonna be, it's gonna have practical applications in way more situations. Um, and even when you are actually armed, um, there are times when like retention of your weapon is a problem, where somebody might be close enough to you, or they might get the drop on you, whatever it may be, um, and you get into a situation where they might be in arm's reach of your weapon, and if you have no idea how to grapple, you have no idea how to specifically retain a gun, you have no training whatsoever. That's no longer, putting it into my perspective. At that point, it's not my weapon anymore. It's our weapon. that weapon has entered the public fucking domain at that point, and that's a problem. That should go without saying. So, yeah, especially if you're only going to pick one, BJJ. I fully fucking all the way. Unless you have like um, a Krav Maga place around you that is like legit, like somebody who, they don't just have their own weirdo oddball system that teaches a bunch of hocus pocus bullshit and they call it Krav Maga. There are gyms like that, and you need to watch out for them. That's its own entire topic. But like legit fucking like evidence based, centered in reality Krav Maga, that can be a bit more generalized. That's going to give you some of your boxing, some of your grappling, shit like that. But generally speaking, BJJ is going to work out better for you because there is an accreditation system there that makes the schools more consistent in terms of like not being full of bullshit. Some might slip through the cracks still, but generally, like if their certificates are up to date, they're in the fucking forget what it's called. There's an international organization that fucking regulates this shit, and you need to be in good standing with them if you want your dojo to be like the real shit. And yeah, as long as they're in good standing with that organization, you can pretty well trust that you're probably going to be getting good instruction there. Obviously, read up on like Google Maps reviews and shit. Make sure that like the guy isn't a fucking creep or something. But still, I would say your first bet should probably be BJJ, and then after that, you definitely want to supplement with some kind of striking art like Muay Thai, or more conventional like Western kickboxing. Um, in a pinch, you can try Taekwondo or karate, or just straight up non-kickboxing, just conventional boxing. Um, but I would definitely prefer like an actual kickboxing or Muay Thai place for striking art, or just like an MMA gym that does some of everything. That would be even better probably, because then you're going to be blending those techniques together. Because there are certain things that you don't get in Muay Thai, you don't get in BJJ. They exist in MMA where those two things really combine, where you're like going from standing up kickboxing into a takedown and then onto the ground. You have like ground and pound stuff. Of course, in BJJ, you're not going to have like, a knee on belly situation where you're raining punches in somebody's face. Like that does not fly in BJJ. And in Muay Thai, that's not going to fly either. So there are all of these things to consider. And you want to have all of these skills if you're going to be carrying a weapon. Absolutely. Gonna cut it here and be back in a second. Beyond just having these skills, it's a hobby. It's fun, at least it can be. Some people, if you're not the type, you're not the type. But if you like to be active, you like to be at least mildly social, you might be really into it. It's definitely worth a try. It's hard. It's frankly, it's cardio more than anything. You will benefit from some strength training and probably also a bit of yoga for flexibility and coordination and stuff. But for the most part, it's really hard cardio. but that's a good thing. It's good for you, and if you can learn to love a little bit of exertion, um, it can be a really fun fucking hobby to pursue. So that's its whole entire. That's a good enough reason right there. Even if none of this other stuff was true, that alone is something that can be worthwhile on those merits by themselves. Just to give you something to do. Frankly, it's you couldn't say it's really zen because you're getting punched in the face or choked or whatever. So it's not really zen necessarily, but I mean, it does put you in enough, how would we say it, psychological pressure at that time, just in a sheer fucking like survival sort of theme that like you're not going to be thinking about like your fucking student loans or whatever, or like some embarrassing shit you said in high school or whatever, like any of those things that are like screaming in the back of your mind that make you feel terrible during the day. You're not going to be thinking about those when somebody is trying to punch you in the face and you just fucking dripping with sweat. Everything you're wearing is completely drenched through, like you've just fucking been pulled out of the ocean. um, yeah, all that shit is the last thing on your mind at that point. So that can be nice too, just to get a mental break from all of the trappings of modern life and just go back to that sort of primal moment of, if I don't have my hands up, I might die. Like, it's it's very centering. It's very grounding. I think it's good for you. It can be a bit humbling, which again is a good thing. There are a lot of guys out there that have an ego. They think that they're the toughest, baddest fucking thing, and no harm could ever come to them. And the only thing that allows them to believe that is the fact that nobody ever has bothered to just fucking lay them out. And so if you go to one of these classes and you know nothing, you haven't been in many street fights as much as you probably tell people all the time that you totally have. Let's be real, most of you haven't. And there's some fucking like teenage girl that's been training for fucking like 6 years, and she does like track and field shit, and also has been getting into weights and everything, and she works you over like an absolute motherfucker, and like the cardio's kicking your ass because you're like a fucking 34-year-old dude that like smokes and drinks and eats like shit and isn't as active as you like to pretend you are. Yeah, you will learn immediately that you need to shut up, sit down, quit being a dickhead, and be a kind citizen. Be patient with people, be respectful, and just don't make an ass of yourself anymore. So it's good for that too. I knew that I wasn't shit when I went in there, and I'm still not shit, and I will never be. I know that much for a fact. I just don't have it in me, honestly. I'm, kind of a pussy by nature. But, I mean, hey, I still worry sometimes about my ability to survive in this world, especially because I know not everybody likes people like me. And for the most part, that shouldn't be an issue. People should still just respect that not everybody is going to be the way that they necessarily like, and I especially find it funny, like getting into a little bit of a political side note here. I don't feel like me being a gun guy really conflicts with me being like a femboy, cross-dresser, whatever. I don't feel like it's really that contradictory at all, because for me, like it's all like a personal freedom thing. Like I like that I live in a place where I can be this way, and there's not going to be like some religious police that throw me off of a skyscraper for it or like shoot me in the street or something. And I also like that I have the personal liberty to carry a firearm, because I have no record. I don't believe I'm crazy, but of course that's what I would want you to think if I was crazy. So, I promise I'm not drunk. As much as I might seem like I'm fucked up, I'm just this stupid all the time. I'm sorry. So yeah, I think it's funny to me that a lot of these people that like are somehow ideologically opposed, or I guess just personally offended by the existence of people like me, don't seem to realize that it's contradictory with a lot of the shit that they say all the time about so many other issues where it's like it's personal freedom and I don't want big government telling me what I can or can't do. And it's just like, what the fuck do you think I'm doing here, asshole? Like, God, do you want to live in a fucking theocracy? Because if that's the case, go to fucking Iran or Islamic State just took over Afghanistan. That's absolutely a theocracy. If you want a devout, religiously motivated government, Afghanistan is your place right now. And if you don't want to live in a place like that, then I'm sorry, but you're going to have to get used to people like me. Because that's what freedom allows. So, but anyways, I've grandstanded enough about that. I will get down off of my soapbox and just get back on the topic of, I think there are plenty of reasons to train. And if you've ever thought about it, but you didn't do it, definitely ask yourself why. And, if it's because you're worried of the time investment before you're going to get all that good, like I said, start now. That'll cut down the time between now and whenever you're decent. Start now. If you're worried about, like, you just don't want to bother because you have a gun, you have pepper spray, whatever. You want those things, absolutely. And you also want this training. You need this training, even more so because you have those things. And especially, you sound like, if that's you, if you're that guy, you sound like you don't really know all that much about self-defense law. So you might also want to look into that too while you're at it, to be honest. Because if you really knew, then you would know better than to just be like, oh, well, if I ever get into a fight, I'll just fucking shoot him and that'll be the end of it. It's not an Indiana Jones movie, bud. There is rule of law. If you're worried about how hard it is really hard, but I mean, you can work up to it. When I went in there, I was still about 340 pounds at that point, and of course I'm on hormones. I have been on and off since 2015. I've lifted weights on and off for most of my life, but very casually and inconsistently. So frankly, even before hormones, I was not very strong at all. And it's only gotten worse after hormones. I still lift though, and yeah, I didn't feel like my strength was necessarily a huge disadvantage in training, because as anybody who has done a fair amount of training before can tell you, technique matters a lot more than strength. It doesn't matter how strong you are, if you don't know the right thing to do to get out of a certain situation, I don't care how strong you are probably not getting out of that situation unless you are like wickedly strong and your opponent is like 12. Okay, maybe. But if they're another adult and you are not like fucking Eddie Hall or whatever, then you cannot rely on your strength. You really need to actually know the technique to get anywhere. And if you're not that strong, but you do know the technique, you still have a shot. Absolutely. So there's that. So I'm coming up on the end of my time limit, so I'll probably just leave it here. Very quick, brief video, but yeah, you should absolutely train. I think there are a few reasons why you shouldn't. I think you need to get after it. I think you need to try to make less excuses about things. I'm not trying to be totally on your ass, but I mean, come on, man, do it. Do it. It's not that bad if you can afford it. I understand it's not the most affordable thing in the world for everyone, and if you are actually physically able. But if you are, if all that applies and you think you're interested, and especially if you're a gun guy, absolutely, go train. 100%. See you around.